and address any questions you might have as to having an educator with you in the field. So, never mind. Again, I'm going to be, oops, everybody disappeared in my world. I'm going to do a quick share, PowerPoint share with you, and kind of to give you kind of your perspective on this, hopefully a perspective, and answer some of your questions you might have. And this is mostly because we won't get to see all of you in Boulder. Oh, before I start sharing, is there anybody that's thinking that they would like to? I know, Ignatius, you were thinking about it. Are you still being able to come to Boulder? You're muted. Can't see you.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it, but I need to look at my schedule closer.
Okay, so we will start, just for timing if anybody's interested. March 16th, we'll start like 8 a.m. morning. March 16th was Monday, and we'll be done probably about late afternoon on Friday the 20th. Tuesday is a big orientation or a big field trip day. We plan on the Tuesday going to the Ice Core Lab, the USGS Ice Core Lab. So we got a tour set for that. And then we will also be going to both the Arctic contract location, wherever their logistics facility is there in Littleton, I guess, Polar Field Service. And then, and we're also going to the Antarctic support contract group, Elaine Hood's place, which I guess is in Centennial or something. I don't know. They're on opposite sides of Boulder or Denver. So that'll be entertaining in itself. But the idea there is that your educator will not only get a little bit of science at the USGS Ice Core Lab, but they will also have substantial time with the logistics providers to go through gear. I think Elaine's going to do the bucket thing with them, even though they don't do that at McMurdo anyway. It's just kind of fun. And then with the Arctic group, they're going to start getting sizes for the educator and have them try on the different kinds of gear related to what they think they might need. And actually, I take that back. I think at this point, CPS does know of all the Arctic expeditions. So they're starting to think about when you're going and how that, so they are starting to make some plans centered around your teacher. And while I'm thinking about this right now, for Antarctica people, when is your SIPs due?
Tax day.
Tax day. So yeah, so if you haven't done so already, you'll need to add your educator to your SIP and get whatever that information is that they need. Usually it's a passport or something, and I can never remember the whole process, but and we'll have to ask Elaine Hood again about what they want for communications and how much data and use and all that kind of stuff as part of the SIP. But we can talk more about that individually with you. Sorry, my dog's going crazy. So real quickly, again, we just, Sarah or Judy, are you recording this one? Want to have like a researcher orientation, and Sarah will jump in at any point here, but here's your faces. Some of you, I realized as you were all going through your introductions, I'm like, oh, this is not, if you want to have like Jeremy on the website or, you know, Evie on the website, you guys need to get headshots to Sarah and your bios so that we can
on it, girl.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, well, these were the only headshots I got this morning, so sorry if you got excluded from the headshot world. I will send out an announcement. I sent one out on Twitter and Facebook and social media land with the new education, with your new educators. I'll do one this week with the researchers announcing that you're part of PolarTREC. I'm trying to be better at the social media thing. And if you have particular institutions you want me to tag or in any of that, please put them in the chat box now, like your hashtags or institution or somebody I should recognize on social media, and I'll tag that. It's easier for me to do it now and collect that information than later. We already covered all of this, but in case you need our award number for anything or reference, it's at the bottom there, but you can also get it from me. Again, we're through the Office of Polar Programs that were funded. So one thing I wanted to make sure that you just kind of encourage yourself and your educator is to participate in the evaluation process. And the reason why I mention this is because especially at the end of the expeditions a year later, we've had mixed results from research teams on filling out the evaluation, but what it does help us do is do better programming. So it's our data points. And if we have data points, we get funded and we can take educators out. So please fill out evaluations. And one thing, another thing I wanted to let you know about, I'm just going to go through these real quick here, is that, oh, hey, I think there's a guy I recognize there. Our evaluation collects a variety of different information. It looks at the educators will all be taking a content knowledge test before they show up at orientation, and then they will take it again a year later. So you might remember when you filled out your researcher application, we asked for some questions related to like what should an educator know by the end of this experience. That gets turned into a test and they all take it. So every one of the participants will take that before they come to orientation, and then they'll take it at a year later. All of our work is contracted through an outside evaluator, Goldstream Group in Fairbanks, Alaska. So all of their tools look at the following kinds of things. They look at the educator's reaction to the professional development and their experience. It looks at the knowledge and skills that they gained. It looks at how they use those experiences. And it also looks at some level, very kind of teacher or teachers can give out a quiz that looks at how students are responding to their experience. It's not really student data, it's a survey. And then we also have something for the researchers as well. And if you're an alumni, you should be annually getting something from Goldstream Group to fill out about how you're connected, are you still networking with education, etc. If you're an alumni and you haven't been seeing something every spring, please let me know, because it's probably an email address thing. And we really do like alumni's responses. So from that data that we've gathered over the years, and we've been doing this since 2004, just to give you an idea, since 2007, it's been Arctic and the Antarctic. This is where we've had program satisfaction. Obviously, your group, there's a few of you that are repeating the experience, so that's good. You've indicated that you've had a positive relationship with your teacher, and that you were positively impacted by the outreach that they did. You viewed that the Janet, Judy, Sarah, Ronnie, Zeb system worked really well for you, and that was essential to your experience, and that you saw there was a benefit to the scientific process. If you ever want to report about PolarTREC and data, please let me know. I have some, we can always give you data about the outreach activities, how many people are following the journals, social media activities, and we can give you specific data about your actual educator as well, and you know, none of the student data has names or anything, but we can provide that information to you as a researcher so you can use it in your reporting as well. You just got to ask. Some of you haven't, several of you are new and might not have realized that we have recently in this new award been asked to incorporate informal educators into our programming. And basically it's just NSF's way to kind of spread the wealth and get polar science out to bigger and different kinds of audiences rather than just K-12 classrooms. And I think we have a nice group of informal science educators that are part of this year's cohort. And we also have some alumni from the last couple of years that will be mentoring them. Related to that, we have several activities at orientation that we try to foster that collaboration, cross collaboration between formal and informal educators. And so they talk about how they can share their science. Formal educators might not have that much experience in informal learning settings, and yet we're saying, hey, go to the library, go to the cafe, go to your museum and talk about polar science, and they may not feel comfortable with that world. So hopefully informal science educators at orientation and throughout this whole process can share those experiences. And it's the same for informal science educators. A lot of times they don't go into a classroom and they may be asked to do so. So cross-pollinating ideas and coming up with good plans and kind of strengthening their outreach is the idea. The other thing that's new to this particular award, and as researchers, you may or may not have been exposed to this, but it's called the Next Generation Science Standards. Even our informal science educators have to incorporate NGSS into any products they developed. Sarah, do you want to go into any NGSS stuff? I have a number of slides about this.
No, I mean, if anybody is curious about more about NGSS and what it really encompasses, I'd be happy to tell you more about it. But it's really basically about it being student-driven learning rather than teacher-directed. So less lecturing and more exploring and more like the real practice of science, let's say, rather than just being told about what science is like. So that's kind of the idea. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from and adding that as much as I can, as well as the informal educator piece.
Yeah. And related to that, oops, I think it was Bill that, that said his school or his classroom's exploratory based, and that's kind of the idea that, you know, there's a whole range of how schools are incorporating NGSS, and this is a good conversation piece with your educator, is to talk about NGSS and how they bring these kinds of standards in. Do they, don't they? There's some states that are just starting to do it reluctantly, and other ones that are full blown. They've changed their entire curriculum around these standards. So yeah, it's a good conversation piece about education in the United States and where this lies. I'm not gonna go into it. So related to this, again, I said we have several requirements. So for your classroom teacher, they will be producing lesson plans. One lesson plan at least needs to incorporate data, either old data, you know, data that about your research, and you can talk about where that comes from or how it needs to be how accessible it is, and so forth. But we want them to hopefully bring in new data into a lesson plan. And then the other lesson plan, and both of them need to have NGSS. And also the other thing is polar literacy principles. I didn't put a slide together, but there's some principles centered around the polar regions that educators and others should be aware of. And we'll make sure that you have a copy of what those are. They are going through drafts right now. But the basic concepts are there and they should incorporate them into any products they have. For informal science educators, we'll discuss with them about what to produce for their product, and they should also be having a discussion with you at some point about these things. And some may develop units, some may develop an activity or a field trip. It just really depends. We've had educator ISEs that worked at museums, and some developed exhibits related. So it really depends on where they work, and that's a little more fluid. But again, it needs to somehow incorporate NGSS and polar literacy principles and use data. This is just another, if you haven't looked at the online learning resources section of the PolarTREC website, please do so. There's a lot of lessons related to the basics of polar science that we don't want our teachers to recreate and do. They can update some of them, but that's really not the focus. We want to have stuff that's a little bit, like I said, incorporates real data and talks more about current science, not old science. So you will have plenty of time to talk about these things, probably really in the field actually, and then when they come back from the field. So our expectations, and I'm sure these are similar to, yours, is that our primary expectation is that the educator stays safe and healthy in the field. I'm sure you agree with that, NSF agrees with that, and that's ARCUS's goal as well. Our next one is that we want them to communicate with you. That's a two-way street. So I've seen a couple of educators working very hard to reach their researcher, and I know you're prepping for field campaigns and you have meetings and everything like that, and you may be traveling quite a bit. But please, if you see an email, just get back to them and say, I'm traveling, I can't deal with this week. Or, you know, let's make some time to schedule some time with them. And especially as the field season approaches, or they're working on post-field activities, they're going to be wanting you to communicate with them. And we also want you to look at what they're creating. So you need to spend some time looking at that. Let's see. I think I already talked about most of these other things. We also talked about the role of the educator in the team, and I hope some of you might have some questions about that. I'm just going to skip. So this kind of just highlights what I just said about making time for your educator. It starts before the field. So if you haven't reached out to them by email or whatever way you best communicate, please do so. We definitely want you to ask them about their education outreach plan. Say, what is that? Janet said education outreach plan. What are they talking about? What they say products. What are they talking about? What kinds of things do you want to bring? And then I think also be very clear as the conversations about being in the field start taking place about what you want them to do in the field and what that looks like. And you know, we'll try to guide that process, but as long as maybe just kind of keeping that in the back of your mind, like, okay, what is it going to look like to have this person in the field with me on a day-to-day basis, and they aren't my grad student or my colleague, and I'm going to have to train them and how to do things. Who's going to be their point person in the field? How are we going to talk about if there's something that comes up and we need to work through a problem or something? So create, connect, sustain, and support. If you have, in particular, as you start to get ready for the field season, if you have meetings on a regular basis with your team, maybe they're across the country or you do them through Zoom or they're in-house, think about how you might incorporate your educator into that process. So the more they learn, the better they're going to be at helping you communicate that science and be better in the field and more effective. So face-to-face, we do support face-to-face interactions. Well, you can use our Zoom room if you need to do that. And I'd say that this also kind of plays into after the field as well. Just some logistics that you should be aware of. We already talked about our relationship with Polar Field and the Antarctica support contract. They will get laptops and cameras. We do have a GoPro they can check out. We will go over all of this training and program requirements with them at orientation, but they are allowed to take like Arctic training if they need that. So we'll talk to you individually if there's specific training, we can support that. The other piece is we do reimburse the schools for the substitutes. So if they're gone during school time, whether it be for our training, for conferences, to meet you, or while they're in the field, ARCIS takes care of that. That's part of our award, so you don't have to worry about that. Just as a note, if you're an Arctic researcher, and we've had this in the past where some want to have their educator, rightly so, for the entire summer. We can't do that because we need to budget. CPS needs to budget per diem and lodging and all of that. So we usually work 4 to 5 weeks for Arctic people. This year we actually have some that are shorter. And then 6 weeks in the Antarctic is kind of the norm. But if you're concerned about that, let us know. We do pay for the travel for the Antarctica educators, as I said, before they get on the ice, and once they come off, we cover their hotel and their per diem. And then we also reimburse if an educator needs to go through an Arctic medical process or PQ process in Antarctica and their insurance doesn't cover it, we reimburse those costs to them so that they can participate in the program. And I think that's it for that, and I'll stop. Okay. I know that was a lot, and you guys are being very patient, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I do want to answer any questions, or if there's any seasoned PolarTREC researchers out there that want to share advice, you're welcome to do that as well. Yeah, go ahead, Leah.
Hey everyone. So thank you for that really great breakdown. I wanted to clarify a little bit if what the availability of funds would be if we wanted to say bring our educator out to our institution to be able to meet in person and train him in our lab space and kind of show him some of the equipment in person. Is that a possibility? And what are the expectations for something like that?
And this would be before you went out in the field?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, we highly recommend it, and I'm sure other researchers, there might be a few here that have had pre-field visits with their educator. That has turned out to be a win-win. I don't think you can go wrong there. So basically, you just need to tell us kind of like, we have a special form that they fill out, but we'll, by email, we'd like to have so-and-so come out for X number of days at this time and figure out, yes, that works or not. And we cover the cost of that. So we'll cover the trips.
Thank you.
Pretty simple. And the expectation is really what, they're there to learn about the lab, meet the team, talk about what's expected in the field, and get to know you. It's really about networking and collaboration. So. Anybody else?
I would just say that reinforce what Janet suggested is that communication is really important. So if you have some opportunity to either go and visit with your educator or have the educator come, it's time well spent.
Yeah, one thing we didn't talk about with anybody is that, and you can think about this, the journals, if you have an educator that's bilingual, particularly in Spanish is the easier one. We do have the capability of journals being in Spanish at the same time, or having journals and outreach can be translated into whatever language, but Spanish is the easier one for Ronnie at the moment, but we can make them do other things if we want to. So that is something, if there's a particular audience that you're interested in, your educator is bilingual, I encourage you to discuss that, those outreach opportunities. Anybody else? Sarah or Judy, any thoughts? Things that I forgot?
No, that was good. I think just from interacting with folks after they've been selected, I get emails here and there, all kinds of little questions. Before orientation, they're all still in that like, researcher is way up here, amazing. I don't know if I should bother them with questions. So it might behoove you to write them an email and just kind of say, what do you got? We're here, it's exciting. Because they're still like starstruck.
They are starstruck.
I would say another good introduction is a lot of times teachers will be interested in any papers that are written on the subject that they're going to be working on in the research. So any sort of scientific papers or that kind of stuff would be a good introduction too.
Yeah. Yeah, and don't worry, I would say I've heard it a couple times, oh, I didn't send that because it was too sciencey or very technical. Don't worry about it. You know, that's part of their learning process. It gets them thinking about those words and terms and your world, you know, that you go to. One other thing that usually comes up in post-field, but I just want to put it out there because it's the time of year where abstracts to science conferences start coming around, and I know everybody gets ready for the field and you're trying to like frantically get out the door and put all those things in, but think about science conferences that are down the road, might be a year and a half from now. And if you're submitting abstracts to pre-write one for the education section and work with your educator to maybe co-present at that science conference. AGU, we do a lot of funding for AGU, but NSTA is the education side. They might reach out to you as to be co-authors on the education one. So anyway, just put that out there because these conferences abstracts start coming by very quickly and everybody's busy. But think about education and your educator being part of those meetings in the future, even if they aren't thinking about it right now. So, all right, we're here. You need us. Thank you so much. It's so awesome. Oh, for alumni that are coming, especially since Lee and Dave are online, Mike Penn, he's coming to Boulder. So we're excited.
He mentioned that to us in an email.
Yeah. So we're excited about that. And Jeremy and Steve, Melissa is showing up. She's coming to Boulder. And who's the other person? Oh, John Wood. I don't think anybody. John Wood. And then
Amy Osborne, we were thinking.
oh yeah, Amy Osborne, I think. We're I sent her a note. we're like, oh, she's so awesome. How can we not have her? Anyway.
Yeah, she's got a lot of really complicated travel coming up. We're trying to get her out here and she's all over the place, but hopefully she can go. That would be awesome.
Yeah. Well, maybe you should just come to Boulder and meet her there.
Oh, that might work.
Oh, the other thing I want to say is if you guys can't travel or you got some postdoc or grad student that's going to be very integral to your team and you thought, oh, they should be hearing all of this stuff, they're welcome to orientation too. So that might be another way. If you got somebody else that's going to be out there. It's a great time to connect with educators. So it'll be fun. All right. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, we look forward to working with you all. Thanks for your time tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.